Welcome to the Ball and Blockchain Podcast. I'm Nils Smith, and today we're talking about NFTs and why they're so stinking expensive. Justin, welcome to the podcast.
Good to talk about stuff again today. NFTs are exploding everywhere. Everybody's talking about them. I'm posting about them on Instagram, and my friends are going, what is this about? And why does Jimmy Fallon suddenly have one? So I'm interested to talk about this and all the different areas that NFTs can go.
Yes.
What's the most recent NFT you bought?
Oh, the most recent one I bought was a thing called Fiscus DAO NFT, which gives me access to this basically extra Fiscus coins and this like whole DAO community. It's a complicated thing that I don't fully understand, but this group I'm part of recommended it, so I bought them. So I bought 10 $50 NFTs, and I bought $1,000 NFT that are Fiscus DAO NFTs. So
interesting, because what you just said was something that is probably not so common. That the first thing you said was, I bought access to something. So you bought an NFT that wasn't just a picture of a monkey that cost $300,000, but it was access to something, which is its own topic, I think. But
Totally.
So just right off the bat, NFTs aren't necessarily artwork, which most people think that that's all they are. They're just like a PDF online, which is the most common thing that I get asked from friends. It's like, I don't get it. Why are people paying so much for a picture of a CryptoPunk, which is just like an 8-bit digital rendering of probably like my picture right here, just like a dude wearing a hat in very bad artwork, is suddenly worth $1 million right now.
Yes.
How can that be worth $1 million?
Because somebody's willing to pay for it. You know, I think is the
Very good
bottom
point.
line of digital art is one of those things that art in general has always been one of those things of like, well, why is that canvas with that paint on it worth more than that canvas with that paint on it, or worth more than a television that could display that art on it, maybe even in a bigger way. It's art is often hard to give a valuation to, which is probably why it's been easier for that to move into this space first. Justin, what's the first NFT you ever bought? And how did you buy it?
I don't remember the first, but I'll give one somewhat of the most recently.
Okay.
First in a group of things that I bought recently was Women and Weapons.
Yeah.
So that's a collection that I think you bought one of those too.
Yeah.
That's a collection that I bought secondhand off of OpenSea because I missed the minting opportunity.
Yep.
So lots of stuff to happen in just that little conversation. So I said all of that.
Yes.
So I went to OpenSea, which is an exchange or a marketplace for NFTs. And so I went there, and Women and Weapons is a cool collection I've been following, and it's an artist that I really think is awesome. She gives 5% to charity. She supports women, and her artwork I think is really cool. So it's a generative artwork piece. So she created 10,000 all at one time that all have unique characteristics, kind of off of each other. So there'll be 1,000 of them that have like a cool sword, and then another 1,000 of them that have blue hair. There you go.
Pull up, but that's my Women and Weapons. If you're watching the video,
well, now I gotta feel like I gotta pull mine up. But so that was one of the first of like in a group that I bought recently. So I bought that. That is a little bit more of a long-term play, where I think this artist is going to build something out of it. I listened to her on a live stream, which thought was super cool too. That somebody with a big following interviewed her and were asking just kind of like, tell me about your art. And so it's helping kind of a local artist, where she was like, I'm working my full-time job, and I was coming home at night and just like hustling to try to get all this stuff done, because I was trying to build this piece that I could then generate 10,000 versions of this and sell that. So she did that, and then she's like, now I want to make this into a community, because she sold 10,000 things for over $200 a piece. So if you're working a full-time job and doing art on the side, and then suddenly out of nowhere you make $2 million, you've got some free time on your hands potentially.
Yes.
So she decided she's like, me and my husband are going to turn this into a business. I want to make a clothing line. I want to do this. And she was like, her entire goal, which this kind of goes to the access you were talking about earlier, is she wants to turn this more into how do I make those 10,000 pieces of art more valuable? As an artist, I can continue to make those more valuable, and then as they're bought and sold to other people, she gets a 10% cut of that buy and sell. But also, the people who own them could have access to, like, hey, if you own one of these, we're going to come out with a clothing line, for an example, and if you own one of the original 10,000, I'm going to let you buy part of the pre-sale, so you get access to buy a hoodie before anybody else in the world does.
Yep.
So I could buy a hoodie, I don't know, at a discount or not at a discount, but I get first access. So if they sold out, at least I had the opportunity to do so. So I really got into her like as a community and as a artist that I thought was really cool, just the way she's trying to give back as well. So
yes,
that's something most recently. But anything in there that we need to break down that I glossed over?
Yeah, no, I think that explains it pretty significantly. I bought one recently called Brain Vomit, and so I don't know if it'll show up here on the screen, but I bought it.
So a flower?
Probably a week ago. It's a flower with the words Brain Vomit behind it. Very weird art to a lot of people, and but it was very popular. It's another NFT collection that had, I believe, 10,000 as well. And it was interesting. I bought it and I put it for sale for 5 times the amount I bought it for. So I think I bought it for, about $400. I think I put it for sale for $2,000. And then 3 days after I bought it, I woke up to an extra $2,000 in my Ethereum wallet, or $2,000 worth of Ethereum. So half an ETH. And that art just sold for 5x. And so it's crazy the money being spent on this little digital JPEG that's a part of this art collection. And I've seen that happen. I've bought others, that have 10x'd in value very quickly. I've actually been doing it with my daughters. And I remember my daughter picked one out. It was a World of Women piece of digital art. I think we paid $200 for it. We sold it for $2,000 within about 2 weeks' time. And my daughter was like, well, Dad, can I just have that money? And I'm like, she's 9. I'm not going to give you $1,800, but that's literally the profit we had just made. Yeah. And so we're now reinvesting that, and we got to have a plan of how we're making money on this. But I feel like the craziness of the money invested just keeps getting crazier and crazier. Snoop Dogg just came out with a collection recently on crypto.com on their NFT platform. There was one, Justin, though, that this is the craziest one I feel like that I've seen recently that I was sharing with you a couple of days ago is JRNY Crypto, which is a YouTube channel, launched his own NFT. He had 10,000 of them. They started on what they call a Dutch auction. So they started for sale at 3 ETH and then slowly went down. They were going to go as low as 1 ETH or until they sold out. Well, it didn't even make it to 2 ETH. And so he sold basically all of his between 2 ETH and 3 ETH, all 10,000. And so I did the math on that. It's about $100 million that this guy made in one day on his NFTs. And they're all identical. So everybody got the exact same NFT. It just has a different number. So the art is identical. What he was selling was not the art. It was the NFT to basically be a part of his crypto club. And so Justin, when you hear that, what do you think? Is that crazy? Is that valuable? Does it make sense?
It's all of the above. I mean, it really is. I think right away my first thought is like $100 million is insane. Like, yes. Until you really understand what's going on with that, I guess. So if I've paid for, you pay for private club access. Let's talk about like just your country club. You pay for country club access that costs $50K or something if you live in a fancy neighborhood. Or there's some like co-working spaces, right? There's co-working spaces where you pay, it's kind of like private access. You get your own little spot. You get to network with the people that are in that group. And there's a big benefit to that. So the value goes up based on the benefit of the networking and the access of that group. Yeah. So the idea of it makes total sense. But in my mind, it's like, am I paying for crypto advice? I'll pay a couple $100 maybe. Like, maybe that's just off the top of my head where I'm at. But to think that there's 10,000 people that are going to each pay roughly $10,000, a little less, $10,000 or so for access to a club is not too insane, but 10,000 people, I think just that you don't have to do that in person and it's just over the internet where it's like, it could be worldwide. You've got people on the other side of the globe that are accessing it. So it's easier to get a group of 10,000, but that dollar amount is pretty wild to me.
Yes.
So are you part of that group now or what?
I was not willing to go that low or to go that high. I was willing, and I shared with you, if it got down to 1 ETH, I was going to buy one. And I think out of curiosity and I think that he is a guy who knows this space. Tony is the guy's name who kind of runs that YouTube channel and that community. That he's going to find a way to make it worth that. I think, but at the end of the day, the guy could now just basically say, okay, you got your NFTs, like I'm going to just go retire now at 28 years old or how old he is.
And he can just move on. He
doesn't have to do anything. Now he will make money every time somebody sells it again. So he is motivated to continue to sell those. But at the end of the day, he cashed in on something that he I don't know that you could spend. I could spend $100 million in my lifetime. He literally, just sold digital little smart contracts to 10,000 people for such a massive amount of money. But
do you know when he started that group?
He just opened up the NFT. He opened up the Discord like 2 weeks ago with the announcement of the community that he was launching. And so, and basically the NFTs that he'd be selling. He started the YouTube channel, I think, like 2 years ago. But I remember I started following him maybe 18 months ago, and he was like, "Oh, let's try to get this to 50,000 YouTube subscribers." And he had like 10,000 YouTube subscribers, and so he was not a big name YouTube channel.
That's a lot of followers, but not in YouTube world necessarily.
Not in YouTube world. It was definitely not going to generate $100 million anytime soon. It was probably not even generating $10,000 a month at that time. And so anyways, he's done well for himself. I think this is one of those examples of this bubble is probably going to pop. That is, to me, it's a bit insane. But I think we see other things, and probably the most popular. There's two projects out there that are the two most insane, but probably the two most valuable and will continue to be, and that's CryptoPunks and Bored Ape Yacht Club, and maybe I'll add a third, and that's VeeFriends, Gary Vaynerchuk's NFT project, which you and I are very interested in and engaged with. But CryptoPunks is thought to be the first NFT project, and those are going for like $250,000 end up.
At least.
And it basically is nothing but the JPEG. It doesn't really get you access to anything. It's more just like just like a flex. It's like a digital flex.
Yeah, that one I think is interesting because, as we'll talk about, like CryptoPunks and Bored Ape being the top two, they're totally different. And CryptoPunks holds value specifically because it's the first NFT. It's recognized as the first NFT. So people feel that they're holding a piece of history and digital art, and that's why the value of those are going through the roof. But that's it. Yeah. Like, it's a PDF online, and have a good day. Versus Bored Ape, which is a community that, interesting enough, I think they created 10,000, and it's an access type NFT, and they also, what I think is the most interesting about that one compared to most other access types is they sold their commercial rights as well. So, you get a picture of a cool piece of artwork that's a ape that looks bored and it has a different personality. And this is the one you see where a lot of, depending on when this podcast comes out, Jimmy Fallon just bought one. Who else? Post Malone bought one. Sort of. You can look at, there's details online if you can read about if they actually bought it or if they didn't buy it. So speculation, but they do own one currently. Yep. So there's that, but there's like an access, and I think those have gone up. So Bored Ape is totally different than CryptoPunks, but also similar in the space. Yeah. Except they're like, I know so I was in New York a month ago, a few weeks ago. It feels like 7 years, but also yesterday.
Yes.
A few weeks ago. And happened to be there during NFT NYC, which is an NFT conference based in New York. And I didn't know this, but the night that we went to an event, there was a different event happening for Bored Ape holders.
Yep.
That 700 plus people dressed up as apes and were waiting outside to get inside to some private venue that they had going on. But it was an access token to a party. Yes. So I don't know what else was going on there, but there was a party happening at the same time. So if you own one of their NFTs, they're throwing a huge private party. And so those NFTs are worth, I think the entry point is roughly $200,000 right now to buy one of those on OpenSea.
Yeah.
And up, depending on who you are. What did I see the other day? I think I saw Kylie Jenner tried to buy one from somebody because she found one that, like had a cool design or was the right color or whatever, wanted to buy it. Yeah. And the person who owned it turned it down.
Wow.
Which I thought was interesting because you could have easily gone with like, sure, I'll sell this to you for $1 million.
Yes.
And then you now have $1 million and you can just go buy a different Bored Ape worth $200,000. So you could still be in the party, but not necessarily own the one. But I think what's interesting with some of the commercial rights side of that is if that person has already created a brand or a company using that specific image as their commercial, like what they're going to sell, they're like, so if they created a Bored Ape number 25 coffee company and then somebody offers to buy it, are they buying just that PDF online or are they now buying the commercial rights to this entire business that they created off of that? So it creates this just open, like, now what? And so I'm just super intrigued by people selling the commercial rights to something like that.
Yes.
In a community that's so hyped up. So in Bored Ape specifically, I think they can, because of the eyes that are already on it, there's a huge opportunity to use those commercial rights to do something else with it if you have the funds to do so. But a lot of people, I feel like, they bought those for under $500 and they happen to own something that's worth $200,000 now, but they still just work a rather regular job. There's no other, they don't have cash because of it, so they still have to start a business off of it. So it's just an interesting scenario with NFTs there. I'm just kind of like, Bored Apes is just super interesting to me based on what's happening in the market right now.
It's really, I think it's just mind blowing. I was at dinner with a friend last night, and he was telling me his neighbor is a musician, never made a lot of money in music until NFTs. He started selling his music as NFTs. Now he's making way more money than he ever did before, thanks to NFTs. He's going to set up a meeting with him. I'm so intrigued by that story. But let's talk about VeeFriends before we wrap up this conversation. I bought, and I'll share my VeeFriend journey. I bought VeeFriends on day one because I believe in Garrett. He's essentially why I was willing to spend so much money. I remember having a conversation with my wife of, Katie, I'm setting aside about $8,000 to buy a piece of digital art from Gary Vaynerchuk. I promise it's going to be worth more. And luckily, because of gas fees exploding and there being a lot of issues with Ethereum transactions that day, a lot of people weren't able to access them. They dropped in price. So I was able to buy two for $8,000. One of them I bought for, I think, like 2.5 ETH at the time. One I bought for a little, like 0.6 ETH. So I bought two. I then sold one of them for about, I think, $10,000 and worth of ETH whenever that was. And I'll share another story of how I ended up losing that money and then getting it back. But I learned a hard lesson in transactions and exchanges through wrapped ETH. But anyways, I got so I sold one of them for, about 10 grand, which paid for both of them. And then the other one, I've gotten offers as high as $70,000 for a Humble Hedgehog little drawing from Gary Vaynerchuk. Now, the value add to that is that gives you access to Gary Vaynerchuk's conference for the next 3 years, his VaynerCon or VCon or whatever they're calling it, VCon. It also, the other bonus I've gotten is they randomly will work with other NFT projects and drop into your wallet, a bonus NFT from another artist. So I got I forget what it was, but I got some other NFT project, NFT that's worth, right now, I think it's worth around $500. Now, why is that worth $70,000? Now, right now I'm getting offers around, I think, $40,000, $50,000 for that VFriend. I'm tempted every day to sell it, but I'm also regretful because I sold the other one for $10,000, which would now be worth $50,000 of, why is it worth, a conference is definitely not worth, access to this conference for 3 years is not worth $50,000 to me. It's probably not worth $10,000 to me. So why is it worth that much? And Justin, I know you want a VFriend, and you have worked on trying to get a VFriend.
Rub it in my face.
Why are you so interested in a VFriend, knowing how expensive they are, and why is it worth that much to you?
That's kind of what I was going to ask you at the same time. But that was going to be my follow-up question to what you're talking about. But I'll tell you why. So I didn't get in on the initial one. So here's kind of two things. I didn't get in on the initial minting because I was unaware. So I wasn't fully aware or prepared. I didn't realize until the day before what was going on. And then I needed to transfer and have enough money in my Coinbase wallet in order to make the purchase. And I just didn't at the time. So I was like, they'll probably drop in price. I wasn't really like that bought in on the project.
Yep.
And now I'm fully bought in on the project because it's a totally different twist where I think what's interesting about this kind of goes into like the theory of how to deal with NFTs as a whole, where some people just like CryptoPunks are just art. It's a PDF and the end. Versus VFriends is access to a conference, but it's also access to a group of 10,000 other people who own these. And so it's a networking opportunity, and really digging into, for just these three we're talking about, who is the founder and how are they going to make these more valuable? Yeah. If you know, with a lot of NFTs, kind of like the standard in NFT world right now is anytime somebody resells those, 10% of that purchase price goes towards the original creator.
Yep.
So whoever created VFriends, Gary Vee and team, they'll get 10%. So if I bought that from you for $10,000, he's going to make $1,000 off of it. So there are multiple things at play there where it's in his best advantage. I can't think of the right word.
Interest?
Best interest. Gosh, it's still, the coffee hasn't totally kicked in yet. It's in his best interest to make those more valuable. That way, if it's worth $20,000 next time, he'll make $2,000 if somebody buys and sells that thing. Yep. So it's in his best interest to make those more valuable. And then how is he making those more valuable? You've already seen that he's dropping other NFTs worth real dollars into your wallet, and you didn't do anything. You just were like, oh, here's a new thing that showed up. Yep. So, we talked about brain vomit and women and weapons. Like if he just randomly throws one of those into your wallet one day because you own his VFriends NFT, then right away he's just giving you money. So it's totally worth owning that thing. Yes. So access to a conference, access to any future giveaways. I think Gary specifically, why I'm trying to get into it, is he multiple times has kind of said he's staking the rest of his career on making these things more valuable, which to me, really digging into the founders of a project. I mentioned Sarah is the founder of Women and Weapons, and I think she is someone who's doing that same thing. Well, she'll continue to add value to the owners of those NFTs. So much smaller scale because she doesn't quite have the reach, but I think that's her goal, is to get there. So I'm buying into her as a founder. Same thing with Gary Vee. I think he's going to take his entire project. Like, he's a marketer and he's going to continue to market himself and his project very well, but he's going to continue to give value, and knowing that if he's going to stake the rest of his career, even if it's just call it 20 years, if he's working 20 years on making these things more valuable than they are right now, that's kind of a big deal. So I've actually considered, like, is it worth investing, even if it's like I missed out on the initial opportunity to buy it for 3 ETH or whatever, which right now would be like $12,000.
Yep.
So if I ended up buying that right now versus wait, should I buy one of these for $30,000? Is kind of the entry point right now. Seems insane to me, considering I wasn't willing to do it for $10,000 a few months ago. But now I'm like, well, the value has gone up where I'd consider paying 30. Mainly because I know over the next 20 years that investment, he's going to work really hard to pay that off. To make sure you get your money's worth out of that. That's why I'm super intrigued in that as a project. So I'm super jealous that you sold one of those, not to me, but But yeah, I think it's I think he's in a lot of ways leading a lot of the conversation publicly for NFTs. There are lots and lots of other NFT projects that I think are really cool artists, really cool musicians. He's just been very vocal, and he has a huge following, so he's generating a buzz in the space, which benefits him, but he's also giving value to the people who support him. So I think that there's a huge upside there for people who are part of his projects.
Yeah.
Well, he's also coming out with another one in the future, just a version 2, just to I'm keeping my eye on.
100%. And I will be buying as many as I can of those as fast as I can. Yep. And I think my lesson learned is I regret not buying more when it was $8,000, even though that was a huge, that was a hard thing for me to purchase.
Yeah, it seems crazy.
It seems crazy. And then I regret selling it for $10,000 when I sold it at $10,000. And that's why I didn't sell it $70,000, the other one. Although, I think my sell price is, while that's hard for me not to sell at $70,000, it's $100,000 is where I'm like, okay, I'll be willing to let it go. And so if somebody wants to buy a VFriend for $100,000, I've got a humble hedgehog
Wait, this is a sales pitch?
I'd be willing to sacrifice my humble hedgehog for 6 figures. But $70,000, because I believe, just like you did, I think you articulated it well. I think Gary is going to make sure it's worth that much. I just don't know whether that's going to be a few months from now, a few years from now. I really do want to hold on to it because I do want to go to the first VCon at least. So I am excited about going to VCon. It's just not.
He mentioned
$70,000.
Mentioned a couple things about VCon that makes me really interested because it's some of the stuff that he's interested in. He's like, it's mainly a conference all about him in a lot of ways, which I think is kind of funny. But also he's like, I'm really into hip hop and I'm really into shoes and I'm really into, and so he wants it to be interoperable, to go back to other podcasts. He wants it to be like all around, not just here's a conference where you learn about marketing, you do another business conference, which we've been to those. But he wants it to be a more of culturally well-rounded, which I think is super cool. And I'm like, that's the reason I want to go in a lot of ways. I'm like, I feel like he's going to bring in some really cool hip-hop artists from New York. And I'm like, I just want to be there for a concert. So there's the upsides to all that. So I'm keeping my eye on OpenSea to buy a secondary exchange option. If something drops one day and somebody's not paying attention and I can snag it for the right price, I'm willing to do that. What do you think? We haven't talked about this at all. We talked about VFriends a lot, but what do you think he's going to do with the version 2 of VFriends? He's going to drop he's already said in next quarter sometime or first quarter of 2022, he's going to drop a second round of NFTs. And part of me is like, well, he already has 10,000 of them and they're coming to VCon. He has said that it's going to be, he's trying to keep round 2 under $1,000, whatever ETH is at the time. What do you think that's going to be for? Because I don't think it's necessarily VCon, but I don't really know.
Well, in VCon is only he's committed to 3 years of VCon. And so essentially that version 1 VFriend value diminishes after that third VCon, and probably even after the first one, based on now there's only 2 more VCons that this is the value I'm getting in exchange for owning this NFT. Now I think he says this is a life project. You'll still have ownership of it. I think practically, if he's going to get it under $1,000, he's going to be releasing more. So I think he had 14,000 of the first one. And it makes, so I have a feeling it's probably going to be something like 100,000 NFTs available, at that $1,000 price point. And then, but who knows what he does with it, whether that's an online community, maybe a private social network that he'll build out like a whole maybe metaverse for that community to hang out in, and only if you have the NFT can you hang out in the special VFriend metaverse community. I don't know. I mean, but I know I went in. I think I bought 48 of his books so that I could get his kind of gift NFT with his book package. I have 12 bottles of wine sitting over in the corner because Gary Vee said to buy the wine, and Gary, like I'm at this point where I'm like, if Gary says you should buy it, I'm gonna go buy. I don't really drink wine.
Simon says is now Gary says.
Yes, I'm trying to give away some wine to friends now.
So I was going to try to buy some of that wine as well, but they don't ship to Texas, so I couldn't buy any.
Oh, interesting.
Which Texas has its own wine laws. I figured out last year with the previous job. That the shipping across state lines in the U.S. are super interesting. So there's probably like 10 states on there that you just can't get it.
That's funny.
But
that's funny. Yeah,
Gary.
So Gary, I'm gonna keep buying Gary NFTs. He is who I am probably most bullish on from an investment standpoint, and I think that we'll just we keep tracking what projects are good projects, which ones are bad projects, which ones are going up, which ones are going down, and where does this bubble pop? And at the end of the day, Justin, you and I are creating NFTs through crossover collectibles. So this is a space you and I are very interested and passionate about, and trying to figure out where do we add value to this. Of right now, it's confusing to understand where the value is, and I think it's being created in different ways through different projects. But I think that it's not. This isn't a fad. And I think that's what I think is important for people to pay attention to is some of these projects will flounder, some of these projects will fail, but this isn't a fad, and I think it's figuring out why certain projects succeed, why certain projects fail, and why people are willing to pay so much money for it, and we'll see where it all goes. So I think that summarizes this topic. We are going to keep talking about NFTs, and so we'll dig into a lot of different various conversations around this. If you have a question around NFTs, blockchain, crypto that you want us to talk about here on the podcast, reach out to us on Twitter. I think that's probably the best place to find us. Our handles are in the show notes. I'm at Nils Smith on Twitter. Justin's at Justin McKelvey. And so follow us there, DM us your questions, and this podcast is basically questions that we're getting from friends and family and followers that are asking us questions, and we're trying to answer those questions as we understand them, as we're learning about them, and do that for the collective whole. So thanks for listening, and we will talk to you again on the next episode.